Shang, imagine a man listening to us right now. He's got a good job, a wife, kids he loves, and people who depend on him. From the outside, he's doing pretty well, but inside his head, he's constantly running this calculation of, am I doing enough? Am I making the right decisions? Am I being a good husband, a good father? Am I wasting my life? And because he takes all these responsibilities seriously, he believes thinking about it more will eventually give him all the answers he needs. How does that man know when he's being thoughtful and responsible and when he's actually trapped in overthinking?
One good cue is to notice how you feel whilst you're doing that. Does that thinking process feel productive? But not only that, does it energize you? Does it motivate you to take some action? Or does it give you some feeling of contentment because you found out that everything's fine? Or are you actually feeling drained, exhausted, more confused, have more doubts, have more thoughts you need to think about? That would be the main difference. So, how does that make you feel?
If you're the kind of man who takes personal responsibility really seriously, overthinking can be hard to recognize because it doesn't always look like fear. Sometimes it looks like preparation, it looks like you're trying to make the right decision, being intentional about your marriage, worrying about your kids, questioning whether you're doing enough, or trying to figure out what comes next. And that's where this conversation gets interesting. Because what if thinking harder isn't actually getting you any closer to the answer? What if some of the things we've been taught about analyzing our thoughts, controlling our mindset, and constantly working on ourselves is actually keeping us stuck in our own heads? Today, Shang Olsen is going to help us separate useful reflection from the kind of thinking that quietly drains all of our time, energy, confidence, and ability to be present with people who matter the most. We're going to talk about why responsible people are especially vulnerable to this, what overthinking can do to our relationships and sense of purpose, and some surprisingly practical ways to stop giving every thought that crosses your mind your full attention. If you've ever replayed a conversation 20 times, questioned a decision you've already made, or spent an hour trying to solve something in your head that still didn't look any clearer afterwards, stay with me for this one. This conversation may completely change what you do the next time your mind tells you that you just need to think about it a little bit longer. We're going to get into all that with Shang Olsen right after a quick word from our sponsors who make the Driven to Thrive broadcast possible. So stick around.
My Pillow's second annual mega sale is finally here. Get our patented premium My Pillows that adjust to your exact individual needs to give you the best sleep of your life.
When I got my pillow, I'm asleep almost immediately. I stay asleep at night and I wake up more well rested in the morning.
Now for the lowest price ever. Kings $19.98, Queens only $18.98. And Giza Dream bed sheets, the best sheets in history, for as low as $29.98. Lux Pure 6-piece towel sets, towels that actually dry you, what a concept, now only $39.98. And our made in the USA mattresses and mattress toppers as low as $99.98. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to take advantage of our second annual mega sale. But that's not all. Order right now and we'll ship your order absolutely free.
Gents, I sleep on my pillow. I sleep on my pillow Giza sheets with my pillow body pillows. I have my pillow bath towels. I have my pillow cup towels. My wife wears my pillow slippers. I would never recommend a company I don't use. We're proud to have Mike Lindell and My Pillow as sponsors of our show. You can go to mypillow.com and use code THRIVE. I know, super complicated, right? Or call 800-794-5834. Like I said, promo code THRIVE for up to 80% off all your orders and free shipping for shipments over $75 for our listeners. Let's get back into the show now. The Driven to Thrive broadcast, purpose, growth, and lasting impact for men. Helping men go from living to thriving, purpose-filled, intentional lives. Welcome to the Driven to Thrive broadcast, purpose, growth, and lasting impact for men. I'm your host, Brent Dowlen. We help men go from living to thriving, purpose-filled, intentional lives. My guest today is Shang Olsen, a Danish clinical psychologist, author, and chairwoman of the MCT Institute of Denmark. For the past 12 years, she's worked with people struggling with overthinking, anxiety, depression, and exhausting feelings of being trapped inside their own thoughts. Her work focuses on metacognitive therapy, which I'm going to let her explain in detail. It's an approach that challenges something many of us have probably assumed for years, that when a difficult thought shows up, we need to analyze it, understand it, fix it, or somehow get it under control. Shang brings both professional and personal experience to the conversation. She describes herself as a former overthinker and understands firsthand how exhausting it can be when your own mind never seems to shut off. Today, we're going to explore a different way of relating to your thoughts, one that can help us spend less time inside of our heads and more time actually living the lives we work so hard to build. Shang, welcome to the show. Now, before we get really deep into the direction we're going today, just beyond the bio that I can, I've already done an introduction on the show. In your own words, who is Shang Olsen?
That I'm many things, but professionally, I'm a clinical psychologist and an author. I specialize in a therapy called MCT, which in a nutshell helps people identify how much time they spend and waste on overthinking, and I help them realize that this is something they can stop. But not only that, I also think a lot about, without ruminating, about what thoughts are and how thoughts are just thoughts and not truth and things that we always need to listen to. So that's something I reflect on a lot. I'm a wife and a mother, and I'm a business owner.
All right. I want to front load this really quickly because ruminating is not a word that a lot of people use in their vocabulary. So, just for clarity, because it's going to be really important in the conversation, explain ruminating or rumination for everybody real quick.
Right. So, rumination is something that we're actively doing in our minds. Basically, we're having a conversation with ourselves back and forth. We ask a question, then we try to answer that, then we ask another question, and we go back and forth. That is different from having thoughts. A lot of people think, a lot of my clients tell me that, well, it's rumination when I have all these thoughts popping up, all these negative, intrusive, and doubtful thoughts. But these are things that we don't control. A thought can pop up. Am I doing the right thing in my life? That's a spontaneous thought. We didn't really choose to have that thought. But rumination is when we grab onto that thought and then start to engage in a conversation in our minds with ourselves.
Okay.
Rumination is has many consequences. It makes us feel tired, exhausted. It makes us feel less confident in ourselves. It creates a lot of confusion, and research shows that it's very closely linked to depression. So people who feel depressed, who feel stuck in life, also tend to ruminate a lot and spend a lot of time in their minds.
Okay. Now, like I said, I wanted to front load that just because it's not a word that everybody uses in their vocabulary every day. So I didn't want there to be any uncertainty as we go into the rest of the conversation because we're going to jump right into the deep end. Now, you said something when you connected with me that really caught my attention, and that was that people with a lot of responsibility can actually feel like they need to overthink in order to cope with their lives. Why does responsibility create this trap?
I think first and foremost, because there are a lot of things to be aware of. You mentioned yourself, you're juggling all these things at the same time. So there are a lot of things to think about. So it's just that it brings up a lot of different thoughts related to the topics that we have working on in our lives. But we've also learned and been conditioned to, in society, maybe that was when we were in school, maybe that's through social media, that this is the right way to go, that it's clever and deep to ruminate, that this is the way to find answers. And sometimes we're even being praised for being someone who reflects a lot. People think it's a good thing.
Okay. Now, I'm a huge advocate for men examining their lives, right? Taking ownership and asking the hard questions about where they're going. So, where is the line between reflection and rumination, and how can a man distinguish useful self-reflection from rumination?
That's a great question. I get that asked a lot. And I think the simplest answer is, how does it make you feel in the long run? So let's say you've been spending half an hour reflecting about your life. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I think it's good and helpful and healthy to reflect and think about what's going on. But during that half hour, how did you feel? Was it a draining process? Did you feel even more exhausted afterwards? Are you feeling even more hopeless and depressed? Do you feel like there's no way out? Those are signs that you're just stuck in unhealthy reflection or rumination. Whereas if you're reflecting about something, that too, I must say, that too can feel uncomfortable in the process. Maybe you're asking some difficult questions to yourself. Am I really happy in my relationship? Is this really, have I wasted my life? That can be uncomfortable too. So the feeling is not only the only indicator that there is we're talking about rumination. But I think that if you're mainly coming out of that process feeling more exhausted, more hopeless, and less motivated to take any action, that's a sign that you're just ruminating. And another factor to look out for is how much time do you spend thinking and reflecting? Because sometimes you can be ruminating, but you're also reflecting, so it's hard to tell. You can look at how much time am I actually spending thinking about this? Am I spending time from the morning I wake up until I go to bed, and while I'm lying down in my bed, thinking and thinking? That's probably not very good. So, am I doing that in specific times I've set out for myself where I can reflect? Do I feel energized? Do I feel like I'm getting somewhere? Or am I just thinking about the same things over and over and feeling exhausted and hopeless in the process?
You that's that whole feeling exhausted in the process. I think a lot of times we fall into this idea that, well, if I think and plan, and I really dwell on this, I'm productive, right? And we reward society for being busy and being overly busy. And we can sit there running through the same problem for the 12th time and actually still feel like we're accomplishing something, which is odd to me. That doesn't seem like that should still feel like I'm making headway if I'm dwelling on it hours later, right? You said something earlier about setting a specific time frame for your thinking or ruminating process. Let's get into that a little bit more, because I know a lot of us who get just trapped in this. What do they say? Analysis by paralysis by
Yeah,
analysis.
yeah. Yeah. So the technique is very simple. You decide that you schedule 15 minutes during your day, ideally later in the day, after the kids are gone to sleep or after you come home from work and had a cup of tea or something like that. You have your 15 minutes, and that's the time you can spend reflecting, thinking deep thoughts, worrying about a problem, trying to solve a problem. It's your time. You can do with it what you want. The rest of the day, whenever a thought pops up that usually grabs your attention, for example, am I doing the right thing? Have I wasted my life? Am I really happy in my relationship? Am I a good enough father? Whatever. What should I do next? All those questions will still come up, and that's okay. But you don't need to answer them. You decide when to answer them. So if you're busy and you're trying to concentrate and you're trying to have some peace of mind, then you can say, I'm going to think about this thought later. The thought can stay, it's fine, doesn't matter, but I'm going to think about it and answer this thought later in my rumination time. And as you go about your day, the thoughts might come up again or new thoughts might come up. That's still okay. You choose, you still say, not now, I'm going to postpone and think about this later. And why does this work so well? Well, it has something to do with how the brain actually works. The brain regulates itself, meaning that it takes care of thoughts and feelings itself. That's the reason why we don't remember all the hurtful things that someone said to us a long time ago, or the things that were not so good that happened in our lives earlier on. We forget these things, or these experiences go in the background. That's because our minds self regulate. So when we decide to postpone worrying and ruminating for later, the mind takes over and then it starts to regulate itself. That means that 80% of the stuff that was confusing us and all these thoughts that were upsetting for us, they are filtered out as we get to our rumination time. And the 20% that's left, we have much better overview over. Now suddenly it filters out basically all the unnecessary stuff, and then we can get right to work and see what the actual problem really is.
I'm really like I'm trying to wrap my brain around this idea of not having to deal with all the thoughts that pop up as I'm going through stuff. I like I was prepping for the interview and I heard you say that in one of your other platforms talking about just because you have the thought going on doesn't mean you have to choose to think about it or dwell on it. Am I a little slow, or is this common? Like people struggle with this idea of
That
not
it's
having to
difficult to.
dive into it. Yeah.
So sorry, what was the question?
You said that just because a thought pops up in my head while I'm thinking about something, right? A question, an idea, I don't have to deal with it at the time, or I don't have to actually validate that thought at the time. I can put it away for later. Like,
Mhm.
is that something you have to work at doing? Because I feel like it's like the rabbit hole. Like I start thinking and something pops in, I'm like, oh crap. And now I'm like down that rabbit hole a little bit. And my brain's starting to split in three different directions. And the idea of being able to push that to the side seems really foreign to me. Is
Of
that
course,
something you have to
because
learn? Sorry.
yes and no. Yes and no. So it's a natural ability that we have. We experience thousands of thoughts that come up in our minds every day. We don't choose to worry and ruminate about all of them. If we did, well, we don't. We just don't. So what happens to those thoughts? They go away on their own. We basically dismiss them. We leave them alone. We choose not to do anything about them. So we naturally have this ability. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to function as a human being. Problem is, we've probably learned that with these specific thoughts, these specific doubts about my life, about my career, about my relationships, my worth, whatever, these are the important thoughts. So maybe you've gotten into the habit of always ruminating about those. So, of course, it feels unnatural to suddenly decide to not ruminate about them anymore. So, it's an ability you have, but we need to refresh that ability. We need to rediscover, help you rediscover that, of course, you can also leave those thoughts alone. And for many of my clients to begin with, this can feel difficult to do. And that's why we practice a lot in our sessions to help them get this feeling that they can, and then they go on their own and apply this in their lives.
Why do we tend to validate the negative self-talk kind of thoughts? The examples you gave were all those negative thoughts of, am I measuring up as a husband? And am I working hard enough? Am I it's there they seem to be all the negative self-talk that we tend to flood ourselves with. Why do we grab onto those so much?
I think from an evolutional perspective, it's helpful, it's adaptive. If we always only listen to the good thoughts, oh, my belly is full, I'm happy, I'm safe, my tribe is cool, then we wouldn't be so careful, and then maybe we would be in danger. Someone would eat us, or someone would kill us, something would eat us, etc. So I think it's adaptive to listen to the negative thoughts because they come up with these emotions, which makes us more aware and pay attention to them, and we can then act differently and save our lives. So we've been conditioned to that naturally. But I think also we have these ideas about what we need to do with negative thoughts. Again, this is something that's conditioned in society or by society, that we need to work out negative thoughts. If you have a negative thought, you need to think positive thoughts. If you have a negative feelings, you have to figure out why. You can't just let a negative thought be a negative thought or a feeling just be a feeling. You have to do something about it. You have to process it, you have to go to therapy, etc. So this is something we also learn, unfortunately, about negative thoughts and feelings. We always have to do something about them.
So, I mean, right off the bat, that sounds so counterintuitive to all of personal development teachings for a lot of for most like what you can find most of the time on the internet or wherever you find your personal development people. That sounds so counterintuitive. We all hear the we got to fix our mindset, right? Get
Yep.
don't let those negative thoughts penetrate. Don't let that negative self talk. This sounds so counterintuitive. It's just like we're all about fix the mindset. And you're saying
Yep.
the thought isn't actually the problem, and negative or uncomfortable thoughts exist. They're not necessarily the problem. The problem is us latching onto them.
Exactly. And it is counterintuitive. And that's why it's so cool to practice this MCT that I do, because people walk out of there thinking, wow, this was so unexpected. I've never heard of this before, but it feels so intuitively true. It makes sense. And then they apply this on their own and then find out, oh my God, I can still exist, I can still function. And not only that, I can be a better version of myself without being miserable all the time because I'm no longer spending so much time ruminating about my thoughts. But it
Okay,
is,
so
yeah.
I'm really into practical, so let's make this really practical. Okay, play a
Okay.
game with me. I'm driving
Uh-huh.
home, and the thought hits me. It's like, man, I am such a screw up. I'm not where I need to be in my life. I how did I get here? Right? Normally, my brain, I'm going to totally start like driving to that dead time. I'm going to totally start analyzing that and spending time with that. What would you have me do differently?
Right. I want you to notice that that is just a thought. It's a thought that popped up in your mind. It feels uncomfortable and maybe it feels true. It feels urgent. You have to do something with it. But try to become aware that you're sitting in your car, you're driving somewhere, and you're having a thought that popped up in your mind. You're different from that thought. You're a person who experiences that thought. Sounds a bit philosophical, but just recognize and have this slight awareness that this is a thought in my mind and I'm here, I'm different from that. And then you can choose to not to do anything with it. You basically make a choice. Do I want to engage in a conversation with this thought? Or do I want to just keep driving and focus on my driving or listen to the music? You make that choice. So, rumination, remember, is a conversation you're having with yourself back and forth. You're the one who's asking the next question. You can choose not to ask more questions when that thought pops up. And then just focus back on driving.
So I can treat it like the passenger in my front seat. I can engage with that person, or I can just ignore the person and keep driving.
Yep.
I
Yeah.
don't have to I don't have to play this game
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
because there's a big part of me that's like, no, I have to I have this time. I got to think about this, but I can choose just to treat it like a person in the front seat and go, we're just gonna listen to music today and not
Yep.
have this conversation.
Exactly. And it's cool to find out that you can. You actually have that control.
Why does that sound like such a oddly complex thing? Like I feel like I needed permission. I feel like I needed permission just to even acknowledge that that's a possibility.
Yeah. But that's because you're fused with your thoughts. Most of us are. Most of us have learned that our thoughts are important. They're important messages, they're truth, they say something about our personality, they predict our future. So it feels dangerous to just leave a thought alone. And as you mentioned, no one says that. All the self help advice out there says you should work on your mindset, you should deal with your thoughts. So it feels scary, it feels foreign, and we've learned that thoughts are so important. So it doesn't make sense to leave them alone. But thoughts are just thoughts. And the more we practice leaving them alone, the more we actually discover that.
Okay, so our entire show is built around growth, right? I always want to uh, challenge the men listening to the show to make one choice today, right? Just that's the whole theme of our show is one small choice better today, right? About something in your life, wherever you're growing, whether you're working on a diet or whether you're working on your personal development or you're just your own mental state. Make one small choice every day, right? Can a personal development mindset actually make things worse? Can constantly evaluating yourself, trying to identify and tackle weaknesses, become a way to teach men to pay far too much attention to what's happening inside our own minds and become damaging then?
I absolutely think that it can be very unhelpful for several reasons. One is that it just reinforces more rumination and more worry. And these things, these strategies are linked to developing mental health conditions down the line. So that's one major consequence. Another is that we, well, we start to treat every single thought and every feeling in our minds or bodies as something that we need to solve. So now we have two full-time jobs. We have our full-time jobs, and then we also have the full-time jobs of always monitoring our thoughts and try to solve and fix our thoughts. So we no longer have this feeling or gut feeling that, oh, this is just a thought. It's normal to feel down when I wake up. Nobody likes to wake up on a Monday, or most people don't. So it's fair enough to feel down. It doesn't mean that I'm depressed. Or it's fair enough that I don't feel the love and complete devotion 100% of the time when I see my wife. It's normal to have feelings fluctuate. It's normal to have a lot of negative and even bizarre thoughts coming up from time to time. These things don't need to be treated all the time. But when we hear the self help advice, we constantly think that we need to work on our mindset. So we start monitoring our thoughts and we start trying to get rid of all negative thoughts and we listen to all these negative thoughts and feelings. So we create more problems down the line and we trust ourselves less.
Interesting. It's, I don't get to hear things very often on the show that like just totally throw a curveball at my brain. Uh,
That's
no,
right.
it excites me. I'm always I am super picky about guests because I can tell guys a lot of things, right? I'm always looking for guests who can tell men something I can't, whether
Mm.
it's life experience or education or training, right? I'm always looking for guests who can tell our audience things that I can't because I don't want this to be a sounding board. I have so many other guys in personal development who are like, "Oh, I'm a men's personal development guy. We should do a show together." Why? Which you're going to say the same thing I'm going to be like two guys in the room going, "Yeah, that's cool, bro. Yeah, I totally agree with you." Right? That doesn't help anybody. It's
Oh,
a completely useless episode at that point. So
okay.
I love this because I'm having to like pivot and think on my feet and like evaluate as we go here. It's like,
Fair.
oh,
Yeah.
maybe I'm doing some stuff wrong here. I need to start looking at my own choices on some of this stuff. Um, but I want to stay in some really practical examples because I really want to make sure that men have the tools and the application to actually start to use these tools, right? Because I think just this one acknowledgement that we can actually have a thought and go, yeah, I'm not going to spend time on that is a huge jump today. And I may not actually be where I'm done with it, but I want to get this
Mhm.
into practical. So like
Sure.
in our relationships, right? My wife is quieter than normal and I'm immediately thinking, oh, I probably did something stupid, right? That's for a lot of us guys, that's our first thought is like, oh, what I do now, right? What's the difference between being attentive to our spouse or creating a problem because I'm starting to overanalyze all the signals?
Well, let's say your wife is upset that you haven't asked her about her day or you didn't connect with her the way she actually needed in that moment. Let's say that's the thing. And that's why she's gone quiet. Or maybe she's just tired or hungry or thinking about something at work, about work. So going into your mind and then analyzing the thought like, oh, what did I do wrong? How often has that helped you? Have you ever found the right answer, or do you always need to end up checking in with her, or it ends up in a fight, right? So, also, when you do that, and let's say her need is really for you to connect with her and ask her about her day and make her feel loved, appreciated, etc., you going into your mind and trying to work out what's wrong is only going to create that distance further. So you're just even more disconnected from each other, and maybe she'll be more upset down the line. So, what you can do instead, aside from asking, sometimes it's not the right time, of course, to do that, is to decide to postpone dealing with that thought for later. And if, let's say, 7 p.m., my rumination time is at 7 p.m., and right now it's 10 a.m., is too long time to wait, just get into the habit of postponing a little bit. Okay, I'm going to postpone for 15 minutes until we get back home. And then we can sit down and I can ask her, and maybe something has changed. So get into the habit of not always going into your mind and try to find solutions through thinking. Sometimes the better option is just to postpone a little bit. I'm going to postpone this for 2 minutes and just see what happens. Just look out the window, just ask about her day, see if something changes in the dynamic.
I think you're crushing my whole personality here.
No.
I
Oh
I
no. Oh no.
I'm the guy who thinks through every possible outcome before I step into a situation, and my brain has thought of every possible outcome for the situation and gone through every conversation and every deviant of it before I ever get fully into the situation. Like I've worked in like big events, conferences, stuff like that for years, and my colleagues frequently throw things at me. They're like, we get into something happens, and I've already got it dealt with, and they're like, how?
Yeah.
Wait, how were you even
Yeah.
ready for that? It's like because I've already measured every possible outcome and every problem
Right.
that could have occurred at this event, and I've already
Yeah.
figured out how I'm going to deal with all of it. And they're like, you can't possibly do that. And then they work with me, and they're like, oh, maybe you can. Okay. Uh, and so like my brain is screaming, just raging right now, going, wait, no, 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 no. I have to work through every possible angle here.
Right. You know what? We don't need to change your personality. That's not the goal. And I'm sure the fact that you can think through these scenarios and prepare for those physical things related to work is what makes you excellent at your work. So we don't need to change any of that. Let's keep that. It's working great. But when it comes to vague things, questions that we don't have immediate answers to, and things we can solve, like, is my wife upset with me? Could it be this or this or that? With those kind of things, it just doesn't work. That strategy doesn't work anymore. So it's not about changing you as a person. Keep that, it's great. But postpone rumination about stuff you don't have immediate actionable responses to.
Oh
Hope that
no.
gives you some relief.
I don't know. This is I have like one trick. And that's it. Like this is how I get through life. Um,
Yeah.
and I mean, I'm sure I do this with my wife on a regular basis because my wife
Mm,
is an introvert. Um, I'm a like I was on a men's podcast yesterday. We were talking about conflict resolution styles and stuff, and I am the nope. Let's burn this to the ground right now. We're gonna work it out right here, right now. And I already have to be
mm.
careful because I can't do that with my wife because that just
Oh yeah.
oh that
Yeah.
ruins everything. She's a thinker. She needs time to sit with it and process. And I'm like, no, we're
Yeah.
gonna burn the ships until we get this worked out. Right. So I've already had to
Yeah.
learn that
Yeah.
in my 25 years of marriage, but um, this idea of not dealing with something right up front just is it sounds so foreign to me. Like it just seems like such a wild idea
Right.
when your game plan is always work through all the possible variables, then make a
Yeah.
decision.
Yeah. Which actually makes me want to add something very, very important. Maybe I should have said this in the beginning. If things are working well for you, if these strategies work well for you and you're not burdened by that, and this is not your problem, then you don't need to apply this, of course. I've had people coming in who wanted to do couples therapy, and one couple is not ruminating, not worrying. And I keep asking and I keep poking, maybe we should do that, but they're not spending time or it's not a problem for them. The rumination that they're doing is helpful. They find that helpful. Then there's no need to change that. So we need to do something different. So if you're someone who likes the strategy, find that it works for you, then no problem. Let's not change that. But if you're really feeling burdened by this, if you're feeling tired and exhausted and depressed and it affects your self esteem, then maybe we can look into, is there something we can change here?
So the overthinking becomes more of a problem when it actually costs us the real conversations and the real connections relationally, right? When I start spending more time working through it in my head than actually maybe having that conversation with my wife or with my daughter about something, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That's
And get
that's
more
what we're trying to get
confused.
away from.
Exactly, exactly. You said it well. Plus, if this is really affecting your mood negatively and it makes you tired and makes you more confused, that's also a sign that it's better to do something than ruminate, do something else than ruminate.
Now you mentioned self-esteem. For a man who's been taught that confidence comes from becoming better or stronger or more accomplished, because that's what we generally reward men for.
Hmm.
What does it look like alternatively to not have your self-esteem rely on those things, right? Because that's our bread and butter for men. That's what we're told most of our lives is improving those stations is what we depend on for that positive feedback, for that, hey, you're doing good, right? That affirmative response.
Hmm.
How do we get into an alternative where that's not it, where we're not dependent on that positive feedback from those things?
Right. I think to some extent it's very human, or I'm sure it's very human that we still want to have positive feedback and acknowledgement that we're doing a good job. We're still human, and it's not realistic to expect that we should be completely free from depending on other people, whether it is for love or recognition or whatever. That's still okay. But if the strategy is I always need to prove myself and get that recognition before I'm okay, that can become problematic. That can become an issue of self-esteem. So if it feels good to go home after a long day and your wife kissing you and saying thank you for doing all these things for us, that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. It's human. But if you're constantly wanting acknowledgement from everyone every time we do something, maybe we need to look at what we can do differently. And usually it has something to do with the ideas that we hold on to about ourselves. I am not good enough unless I make this much money. I am not good enough unless these people really recognize me and want to work with me. I am not good enough unless I have a beautiful wife and well, sweet children, etc. So those ideas we hold on to, we usually do that through ruminating and self-criticism, by through beating ourselves up and comparing ourselves and monitoring. I think a lot of people recognize that. So what can we do about that? Well, the first step is to recognize that we are doing that. Oh, here we go. I am back in my mind, beating myself up over what do people beat themselves up over? Maybe we can have a couple of examples that you commonly hear.
Oh, for men,
Do you
it's a
have any
never.
examples? Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's a never ending barrage. I honestly, I know a lot of guys in the personal development space. I honestly don't know any guy that has a lot of positive self talk. Men
Right.
beat themselves up over everything. I don't make enough money. I don't provide enough. Don't spend enough time with my wife and kids because I work too much. But if I don't work enough, if I don't work this much, I can't provide enough, right? We
Yeah.
fail like we're failing in one of those pillar regions of our lives all the time. And the
Yeah.
negative self talk is at a level for most men that if another man talked to us the way we talk to ourselves, like there would be fists thrown in a heartbeat.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So if we constantly walk around and beat ourselves up and reinforce these ideas about ourselves not being good enough, not doing good enough, etc., well, then that only works to maintain a low self esteem. It's similar to having gotten a wound and you keep scratching. The more you do that, the longer it takes for it to heal. Same thing with self esteem. The more time we spend beating ourselves up, the more our self esteem is going to suffer. So, if you're recognizing that this is what you're doing in your mind and you have found that this has never been helpful, it's never provided you with good solutions or answers, then try and postpone beating yourself up for later. That was stupid what I said, or I messed up that client meeting, or was I not attentive enough toward my wife? Okay, that's a thought. I don't need to beat myself up right now. I'm spending time with my children. Let's postpone thinking about this for later. Let's see how I feel about this later.
That seems such a foreign concept because men are seriously. I don't know. Uh, I have a lot of women in my life, and but I don't understand. The way their mindset works at the same level I do because I talk to men about this stuff all the time, and the amount of self abuse, mental self abuse, with the way I seriously I don't know any man that doesn't have problems with negative self talk at a huge
Mm,
level. Um,
mm,
and it messes with our self esteem. It messes with emotional regulation because we basically have been taught to have only two or three emotions, right? Men,
mm-hmm,
men understand how to process anger, and we understand how to process happy and sad.
mm,
And
right.
that's generally all men are actually taught to deal with. So we try and throw everything into those categories, right? Even though there's a whole
Right.
spectrum of emotions out there,
Mm-hmm.
we're only taught to identify and regulate with really three of them for the most part
Right.
as men. And so it's really difficult for us to process self talk or self doubt, those questions that come up with anything other than I'm a failure or I'm angry about it.
Yeah. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that it cannot change. Although been doing the same thing and applying the same strategy to doubt and failure for years and years and years, it doesn't mean that you cannot choose a different response. It is a choice. But most of the time, we feel like we've lost that choice. We don't have a choice. Thoughts just happen. Rumination just happens. Beating ourselves up just happens. But it is something that we're doing. So it's a conversation we're having again in our minds. And we can stop that conversation. We can choose not to respond. And if it feels, and I really get that it can feel scary and it can feel uncomfortable and like we're not responsible if we stop doing those things. I would encourage you to do that as an experiment. So, okay, for the next week, whenever I have a self critical thought, I'm just gonna choose to postpone thinking about it for later. I'm gonna choose not to beat myself up today. And then over the course of that week, just notice what happens. How do you feel? Does it feel lighter? Do you feel better? Do you still solve as many problems as you used to? Are you actually, in fact, a bit sharper because you can focus on other things? Well, those are good information. That's good data. Then you can use that to see where you need to go next. You can always go back to your old ways of beating yourself up. But if this felt better, why not try that a bit longer? So dip your toes, do that as an experiment, see what that's like.
So guys are generally uncomfortable with the therapy. I sit in a group called the Men's Roundtable Series podcast. It's a collaborative effort. It's usually a roundtable with five or six of us every week, and we have guys at different ages, different backgrounds, talking about men's issues. We have a couple of guys who are comfortable with the idea of therapy. We have a couple of guys like myself who are really not okay with the idea of therapy. But I think most of us are familiar with the concepts of, traditional talk therapy. Uh, and a lot of talk therapy is really not well aimed at men because it's not how men process things.
Right.
But without going deep into, you know, all of the depth and psychology of it, because I'm sure you couldn't actually log it in one show. What is fundamentally different about MCT? Because like just hearing you talk about this and how to face some of these things, I'm a lot more open to this, and I am like highly resistant to general therapy. I've gotten in fights with therapists when I've seen them. Like it doesn't end well. Um,
Okay,
but
cool.
what you're saying is a lot. It clicks with my head a lot better.
Mm.
So before we start winding down the show, explain MCT to us a little bit more and help us understand the differences here.
Right. So traditional, let's say, cognitive therapy, which is the most popular evidence-based therapy out there, uh, in CBT, you would go in and then look at your thoughts. And if you have a negative thoughts, you would really analyze that. Okay, what's the evidence for thinking that you're not good enough? What is the evidence against that? What would you say to a friend? What can you do the next time this thought shows up? It's a lot of trying to change the content of thoughts with the goal of making you feel better. MCT does not do any of that. I've had clients where I don't know much about them, I don't know much about their thoughts because that's not our focus. Our focus in MCT is on okay, so you have a lot of uncomfortable thoughts. How do you treat them? Do you treat them as truths? Do you treat them as important facts that you need to do something about? And how do you do that? Do you go into hours of, excuse me, how do you do that? Do you go into hours of rumination? Do you worry about your future? Do you monitor your body for signs of anxiety or more thoughts? How is that helping you? And usually, most people will realize actually, this is not really helping me. I just don't feel like I can stop. And in MCT, we work on teaching you how to stop. Okay, sounds like you have this idea that this is not something you can control. But did you know you have a choice? Let's show you how. Let's do some exercises in the sessions. Let's do some fun experiments to prove to you that you have a lot of control over what you do next. You can't choose the thoughts that come up, but you can choose what to do. And you can change your strategy, and let's try that out. Let's see how that feels. If it feels better, cool. If not, you can always go back to your old ways.
So if I was to, you know, try and try MCT, right? What happens in my life when I stop giving all my time and attention to thoughts? What becomes possible when I actually start benching those things
Mm,
and controlling that?
right. What I typically hear, which is not something you would expect, but I experienced this myself when I practiced this on myself back in the days. It's that you get more time back. It feels like you've gotten many more hours during the day than you used to have. But nothing has changed physically. It's just because you're now more outwardly focused. Your attention is not constantly caught up in your mind. So now you're free to use that and spend that on good things, productive things. That's what happens. You feel lighter. You just feel like something has been removed from your shoulders, a weight has been removed from your shoulders. And you also feel like you're better at concentrating, again, because you're not spending time fighting your thoughts and thinking about your thoughts. Now you can focus on that email, that conversation. You can actually be present with your children. So that happens too. People's mood change. Your baseline is more like stable rather than constantly swinging back and forth. Not that it's still normal to have bad days and sometimes very good days. That's fair enough. That happens to most of us. But the mood becomes more stable. So you don't have these very huge dips and very highs. You just feel good. And you feel confident in two ways. One way, you just feel more confident about yourself as a person in your interactions, but you also develop a different confidence about your mind because now you've learned that you choose, not your thoughts. Your thoughts are not always important. You choose what to do with them. That gives a huge confidence, which Needs to be tried, I think. But yeah, those are common things I would say people notice.
Now, I want to make sure that we tie in everybody with you so they can go further because we can't answer all the questions in one show. Do you have any big projects that you're working on that you want to share with everybody today?
So I have a YouTube channel called Shang Olsen, so my name, and then metacognition and mental health. And on there, I talk a lot about our relationship to thoughts and what we've learned from society that may not be true, and then specific things you can do with specific problems. So go and check it out. I talk a lot about MCT and our relationship to thoughts there.
All right. And for all of you who are watching the video of this, you can see her YouTube channel on your video screen. For all of you who are listening to this on audio, of course, I'll have all of Shang's links down in the show notes. We'll see if I can still talk by the time I get through 3 or 4 interviews today. But we'll make sure that you can connect with her because I highly recommend, like, I'm very resistant to traditional therapies. I try and be honest with people when I'm on the show and talking, and I always try and be honest, and I am super resistant to traditional therapies. But this actually piques my interest because this is something I see men struggling with all the time, is this idea of invasive thoughts just jumping in their head, us beating ourselves up and actually believing it. And so I want to make sure that you can connect with her after the show. To wrap up the show, there's men listening who spent years trying to think his way into becoming better husband, father, leader, man, whatever. If he remembers only one thing from the conversation, the next time his mind starts demanding that he solves things right now, what do you want him to remember?
Oh, I have to choose. Then remember, rumination, worry, overthinking is not the way to improve and solve your problems. 100%, it's not.
Gentlemen, for Shang and myself, thank you for joining us today. Be better tomorrow because of what you do today. We'll see you on the next one.
The Driven to Thrive broadcast: purpose, growth, and lasting impact for men. Helping men go from living to thriving, purpose-filled, intentional lives.